This is the second of 3 NASBE sponsored, NASBE being the National Association of State Boards of Education, NASBE's sponsored New Member Institute. We had a delightful session 1. For those of you that missed session 1, we have recorded it, and so it is available to you on our website. If you have interest in knowing exactly where it is, we can connect with you and point you to it. I would commend it to you because I think we covered a lot of interesting ground, although I frankly let others speak to it if they are so inclined. Anybody want to reflect on session 1 for those who may be new to session 2, what you thought about it, and so forth?
Hi, this is Jackie Clay from Arizona. How are you? Great to see everyone.
Doing well, Jackie. I know I can always count on you to break the silence, right?
I would say I took a lot of notes. I used the snipping tool a lot, and I still refer back to those notes. But what I really liked about the training, it was very informative, but it was just great to see my peers and see what everybody else is doing and to connect with all of you. That was just the whipped cream and cherries of the training, and I really appreciate that.
Great, thanks for your reflection, Jackie. I appreciate it. I've noticed a variety of NASBE's board leadership is on, so I'm going to actually turn it over to Janet. Are you there? Would you mind making a few comments to our assembled new members? Go ahead, Janet.
I am here, and I'm happy to welcome everyone to the second session of New Board Member Institute. I think you're in for a real treat today, because if you are a new board member, you likely have experienced board meetings being run by Robert's Rules of Procedure and under Parliamentary Procedure, which can be a little daunting for even those of us with experience. And we have an expert with us today who will really enlighten you and make this all work well for you. And so I think you're in for a real treat. This typically is one of the most popular sessions of New Board Member Institute. I think it's something we all have such a need for, that it spikes our interest, and we have an expert in Darlene Allen to work with you today. So I hope that you will enjoy your experience. I hope that you'll recognize that NASBE is such a valuable entity to all of us as state board members in terms of the help, the guidance, the richness of what they offer to help us as state board members. So thank you, Paolo. Glad to be with you all.
Thank you so much, Janet. Also, a few other of our board members who may want to wave. I see Christine Benson from Illinois. She's our chair-elect, meaning she will be the chair of the board of directors next year. I see Woody Exley, who is our area director for the northeastern part of the country. I see Fern Desjardins from Maine. She is the current secretary treasurer. Let me see, am I missing anyone else? I think that is the representation of the board of directors. What we're going to do is Darlene's going to talk about parliamentary procedure, and then we're going to take a little bit of a break after she's done. Then we're going to conclude with 2 sessions, one that we call Leading with Evidence, where our very own Abby Potts is going to talk about using research, using data, and the different types of research, and the quality of research and the quality of data, and what you ought to be on the lookout for. And then we'll end with a little bit of an overview of some of the different projects that NASBE oversees in some of our different priority areas, and what that looks like, many of which have opportunities for state board members to engage with us on.
So as they stated, I'm Darlene Allen. I enjoy being here at your New Member Institute. I don't remember the number of times I've been here, but I've been here a couple of times. So hopefully you will also have a good experience from this. So as a presenter, I am the immediate past president of the National Association of Parliamentarians, and I am a member of the American Institute of Parliamentarians. Today, hopefully, we're going to be able to provide information to help you manage meetings more efficiently through preparation and parliamentary procedure, and to take home something that you learned today to help with your meetings. So we'll be covering the history, parliamentary procedure basics, governing documents, types of meetings, navigation tools, consent agenda, motions, debate decorum, amendments. We'll have a demo and we'll talk about voting. So the history of parliamentary procedure, General Robert was in the Army Corps of Engineers. They were responsible for lighthouses and the Galveston seawall. He attended a church meeting and he was elected the chair. That particular church meeting lasted about 14 hours. Once he got home, he said there must be a better way to do this. And that's how we got the original version of Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order is now in its 12th edition that was released in August of 2020. And there are roughly 700 pages to the book now. So the basics of parliamentary procedure, it is parliamentary law. It's combined with the rules of order that work toward the orderly transaction of business and meetings. Why? To conduct meetings effectively while making decisions in a fair and consistent manner. And when do you use it? When common sense and common courtesy are absent. The basics principles of parliamentary procedure: honor the will of the majority, the right of the minority to be heard, protection of the rights of absentees, courtesy and justice for all, and consideration of one subject at a time. And I didn't say one motion at a time, because at any particular time, there could be a number of motions that are on the floor. And so because you basically answer to public, it's important to be aware of the governing documents that are available and to make sure that as a member who does indeed answer to the public, that you have those documents with you at all times. There's the federal law and judicial precedent, state law and judicial precedent, local laws or ordinances, the charter, the Constitution, the bylaws, and you notice there's no hyphen in the word bylaws, any special rules of order. As a parliamentarian, when I see special rules of order, that says to me there's something contained in those rules that goes against what Robert's Rules of Order says, and you are entitled to do that. Your membership is entitled to do that. If there's a particular rule that you need to adapt for how you all do business, then comes the Rules of Order, the Parliamentary Authority, which is where Robert's Rules of Order sits in this chart, standing rules, any policies and procedures, and then you have custom. All of those particular documents are important in order for you to conduct business and to do so in a fair and consistent manner. Types of meetings that are possible: regular meetings with your school board associations. You hold meetings X day of the week, every other month, monthly. All of that is spelled out in your documents. Any special meetings, the authority to hold special meetings should be in your governing documents. Any adjourned meetings. An adjourned meeting is a meeting where, say we're meeting today. We didn't get through everything on the agenda and we need to cover some items before the next meeting. We will schedule a meeting today that is a continuation of today's meeting, but it has to occur before the next regular meeting. So that's what an adjourned meeting is, the annual meeting. Any executive session, and because you basically have to deal with the public, there are specific rules, sunshine rules that may be applicable to your situations, but you need to be aware of what they are and whether or not executive sessions can be held, and if so, the manner in which they can be held. Public meetings, a portion of your meetings may need to be open to the public, or there's a public review portion of the meeting. But through all of that, according to Robert's Rules of Order, meetings should be as formal or as informal as needed. And so now in this day and age, we also have virtual participation. There are some organizations, some school boards that are still meeting through a virtual means, and then there are some that have moved to a hybrid model. So with that, with the online and electronic meetings, you need to make sure that the authority is in your bylaws or your governing documents. That could be your state and local statutes. I know here in Washington, D.C., I am from Washington, D.C., and there were organizations that did not have the ability to meet virtually or electronically. And Washington, D.C. proper basically held out, and they had statutes that were in place. They were temporary, which did allow organizations and meetings to be held without regard to geography. So looking at the local and state statutes was very, very helpful during especially the beginning part of the pandemic. There should be rules to govern the meeting, a process to recognize speakers, to make motions, debate and a vote, and there should be a team of members to help handle the technology logistics. And for your school board association, you probably do have staff members that do assist with that. And if there are questions as we go along, you can unmute and please interrupt me because we have a small group today. So quorum. Quorum is the minimum number of members who must be present at the meetings of a deliberative assembly for business to be validly transacted. And that would be the quorum of your assembly. You need to refer to your bylaws or other governing documents in order to determine what that number is. There are certain navigation tools, the agenda, and Mrs. Sun is an acronym that is used in Robert's Rules of Order for organizations that don't have a set agenda or a set process to which to use. So the order of business, it may be arranged according to rules or any special rule or custom by the person that is preparing the agenda. And the governing documents of your public body will determine who may place items on the agenda and whether or not additional items may be added. And without having a standard order of business, usually it's a call to order. There's a roll call that may occur. The approval of minutes is actually the first item of business. Any reports of officers, board, and standing committees, any reports of special committees, any special orders and unfinished business and general orders, and any new business. Special orders would be those items where the bylaws or your governing documents say have to occur at a particular meeting. And because you are a school board association, consent agenda may be something that basically figures in very prominently in how you hold meetings. And basically using a consent calendar or consent agenda that allows for routine, non-controversial items to basically be grouped together, and that requires no vote, well, shall I say a single vote, but there's no debate on the items. Adopting the agenda or approving the minutes are example of those kind of items that would be placed on a consent agenda or a consent calendar, which should be the least controversial items as possible. However, if something is placed on the consent agenda or the consent calendar, any member, a single member, can pull an item off the consent agenda and have it remain with the regular order of business and available for discussion. So as you're starting your meeting and there's a particular item that has been moved to the consent agenda, if you as a member would like to discuss it, you would let the chair know that you would like to remove that particular item. And again, any one member has the right to be able to do that. We're going to jump right into motions. The types of motions that there are main motions, subsidiary motions, privileged motions, incidental motions, and motions that bring a question back or the bring back motion. The main motion is how the business comes before the body, and the subsidiary motions assist the body in considering or disposing of a motion. Privileged motions do not relate to the pending business, and incidental motions relate to the business, the body of its past or future actions. And basically, incidental motions are assigned as they come up, they are handled. And I need to retype that sentence because it doesn't give you all the information about incidental motions, but as they come up, they're incidental to the business and they must be decided immediately. And motions that are bring back motions are the motions such as take from the table, amend something previously adopted, discharge a committee, those and reconsider. And those are the motions that are important, that something has happened or something has occurred and you want to bring it back again in order to discuss it. Are there any questions? I quickly went through those because I wanted to spend time on the other things.
Yes. I
Sure.
have a question, Darlene. We have a situation where we'll have the agenda printed out and the chair will say, can I have a motion on item 6? And then somebody says, so moved. And but there's no motion. It's just on the agenda, it's just a topic. So would I be correct in rising to a point of order and asking that we actually have a motion to vote on or discuss?
And Woody, you must be reading my mind today. I have a slide there that we're going to discuss on that. So
We didn't rehearse
hold
this in advance, did we?
We did not. So when we get to that, you'll see why I'm going to pay special attention to that. So,
Okay.
but I
right.
do have a slide about that.
Okay.
So what I want to say about motions are that motions have rank or precedence. There are 13 motions that have rank. And I just want to say at this particular point, out on the internet, there is information with several parliamentarians that offer free worksheets, data sheets, and that you could download and get information about motions, about parliamentary procedure. Parliamentary procedure is something that, and especially when it comes to motions, you won't learn it all in one day. It takes practice. And to be able to use it, I actually had a client where the particular members all focused on one motion. So if the motion to raise a question of privilege was mine, every time that it could come up, that's the motion that I would use. So through practice and getting to know the characteristics of a motion is how you'll be able to get it and to know what's in order and what's not. But there are 13 that have rank, and I'll just start here. The first motion at the bottom of the ladder, and that's what I need you to visualize. A ladder is the main motion. That is how motions are put on coming to the business meeting. Next, you have postpone indefinitely. That is actually the motion that is used to kill a particular motion for this session. So if a motion came up and we intended to kill it, postpone indefinitely is the motion that would be used. Above that would be amend. So while a main motion is on the floor, the motion to postpone indefinitely is on the floor. Amend could also be on the floor at the same time because these are the motions that have rank. Everything above it would be able to be on the floor. Then the motion to commit or refer. You've been talking about a particular topic for a while. There does not appear to be a solution. There's still additional questions. You can send it to a standing committee, or the member could create a special committee and send that particular matter there. But if you're sending something to a committee, it's best to give them a date about which they should report back. Postpone to a certain time. You're about to discuss a matter. The person with the financial information is not at the meeting currently. So we could either postpone getting the financial report until sometime this meeting when the person arrives, or at the next regular meeting. So that's what postpone to a certain time does. Limit or extend time for debate. Basically with that, that's a motion that if you're limiting debate, you're taking away someone's right to be able to debate a motion. You should check your governing documents because there may be some restrictions that do not occur in Robert's Rules of Order. In Robert's Rules of Order, that motion requires a second and it requires a 2/3 vote in order to adopt, and it can be amended. previous question, that's the motion that most people are used to calling the question. It's the motion to stop debate. It requires a second. There is no discussion about whether you're going to stop discussion. And based on the outcome, first you decide whether or not you're going to stop discussion. And then once that decision is made, then you move forward to what the pending motion is. And I see your hand, Janet.
Thanks, Darlene. I'm just wondering, are there any motions that do not require a second?
And there are motions that do not require a second. I can provide a copy of a chart for you that one of my fellow parliamentarians has produced. So I want to let you know it's not something I produced, but it is out there on the internet. So I will provide that information for Sharon to make sure that you get it. But there are certain motions. Some of the incidental motions do not require a second.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So lay on the table, that motion is mistakenly used to kill a motion. Basically, when you lay something on the table, you intend to temporarily put it to the side and you intend to get back to it. Either you want to get back to it at this meeting or the meeting by next month's meeting. So that's how lay on the table should be used. It is usually misused when you really mean postpone indefinitely. You're saying to table something. And so just to get everyone just aware of the fact that lay on the table is supposed to be for something urgent and you intend to get back to it. Call for the orders of the day. That's a motion that one member can make. You basically have gotten off the agenda. That's a demand to get back on the agenda. Raise a question of privilege. It's another one member motion where it doesn't affect the business. It affects the environment or something that's going on. It's too hot, it's too cold. Could you please mute the members because we can hear all of their background noise. It either affects one person or the assembly. To recess, that's where you take a short break, and also the motion to adjourn. Now, the motion to fix the time to which to adjourn is the top motion, but that's what I described when I said a continuation of the meeting. So that would be the motion that would be at the very top. And so you start at the bottom, then you move up the ladder, and to actually process them or vote on them, you start at the top, you go down the ladder.
Darlene?
Sure, Earn.
So the adjournment, I've heard in some meetings that there should be a motion, a second, and a vote to adjourn. And then I've also seen that the chair can declare that no further business is needed, and so the meeting is adjourned. It's simply declared by the chair. I've been wondering for some time, what is the correct way to adjourn a meeting?
And I would say that correct way is not a term that I'm going to use. I would say that it depends on your custom. It is not improper to make a motion and have the second in order to adjourn the meeting. But if there is nothing else on the agenda, you've covered all the agenda items, the chair can certainly declare the meeting adjourned because there's nothing else left on the agenda. So that is something that could be done. And I know some groups just like to make a motion, the second motion and vote, but it really is not necessary if there's nothing else on the agenda. The chair states that, gives a pause in case one of those items can be made, such as if someone is going to give notice about something that's going to happen at the next meeting, the chair pauses long enough to allow for that, but the chair can declare the meeting adjourned because you have completed all of the agenda items.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying.
Okay. And so basically how you would handle a motion, the member gets recognition from the chair. If you're talking about small school boards, it could be a matter of raising your hand or somehow getting the chair's attention. Then the member would make the motion. Another member seconds, and this is part of the question that was asked. You see the asterisk because not all motions require a second. And then at that particular point, the chair states or repeats the motion, which places it before the group. Once it's before the group, it belongs to the group and not the maker of the motion. So before you get to step 3, if a member wanted to, the member that made the motion wanted to modify it or withdraw it, the member could do that. But once you get to step 3, once it's been stated, that is either the chair of the meeting did it, or the chair asked the secretary to do it, or the clerk to do it. But it was stated, once you get to step 3, it doesn't belong to the maker, it belongs to the body. Just wanted to emphasize that. And then the members debate through the chair at step 4. Then the chair puts the question on the motion to a vote. The chair at that point cannot stop debate. Only other members can stop debate. The chair can take the temperature if you like. There appears to be no further discussion, that sort of thing. But only the members can stop debate. When there appear to be no further discussion and no one has anything else to say, then the chair should put the motion to a vote. And after the vote is done, the chair will announce the result of the vote and the effect. So withdrawing the motion, and I just wanted to emphasize, before the chair states your motion, you may withdraw it or you may change it. Once it gets at step 3, it belongs to the body, and the maker of the motion would have to get permission from the body to withdraw it or to change it. And so at step 3, and that's why I actually had a client recently where they were making motions and we were into step 4. It was open to debate. At debate, someone moved to amend it, and they used that term friendly amendment. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And basically with that, the maker of the motion said, no, I don't agree. I don't want you to amend it. And then at that particular point, they had to have me speak to it as the parliamentarian. And I explained what I just explained to you all about once it got past step 3, it didn't belong to the maker anymore. And any member at step 4 is certainly has the right to propose an amendment because it belongs to the body. And that's one of the actions that the body can take. So Woody.
Yes.
What is the forbidden phrase? A, so moved. B, I so moved. C, I want to make a motion. Or D, I motion.
I want to make a motion.
So you think D, I want to make a motion is the forbidden phrase. And that's forbidden according to Darlene.
C.
Okay, C. Does anyone else have Deborah from Delaware?
I am thinking based on your previous comments, so moved would be the offending phrase.
Okay. So let's just see. It's a trick question. All of them are incorrect.
All of them. Oh.
So moved, I so moved. I want to make a motion and I motion for the very reason with the question that Woody asked. So moved what? The secretary, what is the secretary writing? You have not stated what it is, the action that you want taken by the body so that the chair can't repeat it, so that the members won't know what to debate. And so you can't take a vote if you don't know what it is, the action that you want taken. So if someone does that, it certainly would be within what the chair could do by asking for the motion to be clarified or written. The secretary could also ask that it be written, but at this particular point, you don't know what the motion is because it has not been clearly stated.
But so I, as a member of the board, what can I do?
Well, Woody, what we're hoping is that through training that the chair and the secretary will speak up so you don't have to. But
Well,
if you
Well, that's not happening.
Okay,
We're
so
voting on, item 6, which is not a motion. So I read somewhere that I could say, I request I rise to a point of order. Is that not correct?
you could do that. I would probably start with a parliamentary inquiry and ask if that was a motion. Was that in order because there wasn't a motion? I would start there. So it's like you're ringing the bell, hopefully, for the person that's presiding.
So after somebody says so moved, and then somebody says I second it, Then what do I say?
At that particular point, you could interrupt to ask about what the actual motion is that you're about to vote on.
I can just ask that?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have to say a point of order?
At point of order, parliamentary inquiry, either one of those things. But if you, I mean, you're more comfortable with point of order, just what motion, because point of order means that you believe the rules have been broken.
Yeah, right.
And-
Well, I believe they have.
Okay. And so then if that's what you believe, then point of orders is how you should state it.
And it's more dramatic, right?
Woody, I just get the feeling that you're going to make it dramatic, whatever.
Right.
I'm not saying that you aren't going to be justified, but I think that hopefully if it happens enough and you basically raise the question, what is it that we're voting on? We don't know what we're voting on, that they will break that bad habit, because that is a bad habit. And again, I don't know what the secretary or the person that's recording this, I don't know what it is they're writing if the motion hasn't been stated.
Yeah, because you said the chair is supposed to restate the motion. So I guess I could request that the chair restate the motion if she hasn't done so.
Right.
Yeah.
Darlene, a quick question though.
Sure.
If the chairperson of the meeting says, do I have a motion, for example, do I have a motion to approve the budget as presented? Would you be appropriate at that point to say so moved, since they've indicated what action you're looking to take, which is to approve the budget as presented?
And my response is going to be no. So moved is never appropriate. If it's a budget, and if the budget is coming from a committee, the person that's making the report should, at the end of their report, move the adoption of the budget.
Okay.
So whomever is giving the report, one of the final things they're going to say, because they've gone through, I move the adoption of the budget. So that responsibility lies on the person giving the report, especially if it's from a committee.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If I could also add something, it may be that many of you see some of these things that Darlene says are not good practice actually happening fairly routinely at your meetings. This would be an item that you could raise with the chair informally, or raise with your board exec and say, hey, look, we really ought to tighten up our processes to make sure they're more clear and more in compliance. And then over time, you could do some board training, because Deborah, I know exactly where you're coming from. We hear these things all the time, and they're sort of taken for granted as the way a board does. But I'm always an advocate, and I think Darlene would share this, in boards continuing to tighten up the precision, right? It's very important to be precise, which goes to Woody's point. People have a right to know what they're voting on. So the more clear those motions can be made, the better. And if you find that your practices in your board are a little bit, hazy, having a conversation about working on that is always a good thing.
Yes, and I would agree, as Paolo has stated. And the point to it with the training, changes don't happen overnight. It takes time. So it may be something that's been brought to your board's attention. It may take a little time in order to correct it, but I think half the battle is knowing that there needs to be a correction, and why, for the reasons that were stated, and then move toward making those particular changes to make your meetings, all your members, is more precise and more clear about the decisions that are being made. Okay. So what would you say? An officer or individual, I move to, or I move that. The committee, on behalf of the whatever committee, I move the adoption of the following motion. And that goes to your question, Deborah. If it is indeed a committee report, at the end of the report, the committee should be moving the adoption of the motion. So we're going to stamp out so moved, I so move. And so I so move is not a motion. Janet, I see your hand.
Yeah, just a quick question. I understand that we have committees, and then they come and the committee makes a motion to the full board. So my question is, sometimes in committee, our board members that serve on that particular committee do not vote unanimously for a motion. And so do you need a unanimous vote or a majority vote of the committee for the committee to move action forward for the full board?
And my first response would be, you need to look at your governing documents, whether or not it states whether or not it has to be unanimous or not. If your governing documents are silent, Robert's Rules of Order would say a majority of the committee. So it would be a majority.
Okay, even if that committee is like 5 members, if we have a vote of 3 to 2, that carries the day and we can move it, saying the committee moves the adoption of the motion.
Right, and unless your documents say a majority of the members present, if only 2 voted yes and 1 voted no, it would still be a majority of those who cast their vote.
Okay, thank you.
So debate is equal to discussion. You should be confining your remarks to the motion that is on the floor. So all your remarks should be germane or related to what's on the floor. We shouldn't be talking about hiring new teachers or whatever, and then we go off on a tangent about buying blue parasols. Whatever the motion is, you should stay on the subject. And if you don't have rules in place that say otherwise, the maker of the motion can speak first, and the presiding officer usually calls on the maker first, and that each member can speak twice for 10 minutes each time, unless you have rules that say otherwise, because that's what Robert's Rules of Order says. And if that's the case, if you don't have any rules that say otherwise, the chair needs to be able to take some sort of cue to know who has spoken and who hasn't, so that to give everyone a fair opportunity to speak to the motion, especially if someone has already spoken, making sure that everyone who hasn't spoken gets an opportunity before someone who has already spoken and is looking for their second opportunity to speak. So working with the secretary or whomever, whatever administrative person they may be, making sure that you're keeping track of that. And so you should refrain from attacking a member's motives. It is the issue and not the person that is under debate. You're addressing all remarks through the chair. Avoid using names if it's possible, especially if it's a contentious issue. There's nothing worse than there's something going on and someone calls your name. That gets you, you automatically become defensive, and, if someone calls your name. So being able to work through that with your colleagues and your fellow board members. And Woody, I'm going to call on you right when I finish this last statement on the slide. The maker of the motion can't speak against his or her motion. You made the motion. You can't speak against it. You need to refrain from disturbing the body with sidebar conversations. And according to your rules, you want to check your rules for this. The presiding officer may relinquish the chair to speak in debate. Robert's Rules of Order states that, but if you have rules that say otherwise, that you should definitely say that. Woody?
So addressing all remarks through the chair, if it's not a debate, let's say the commissioner makes a report, and then I want to ask questions. How do I state that? Do I address it to the chair?
Yes, you do. Discussion equals debate.
Okay.
Okay, so even though it may not be negative or confrontational, discussion equals debate.
Just questions. So I'd say, Madam Chair, what do I say?
You get recognition. Yes, you would get recognition to speak, because after the report is made, the floor, as long as especially if it's a motion, if it's a report, the floor is open for debate / discussion. At that particular point, you would raise your hand so to let the person that's chairing knows that you wish to speak.
Yeah.
And so when it's your turn to speak, they'll call on you, Woody.
But when people make presentations, we generally just ask them our questions. Is that okay? Or do we need to say, Madam Chair?
Well, it depends on the formality of your board. Okay, so if that's what your board does, I would say that is a good practice and it works for your board.
Okay.
Lauren, I see your hand.
Hi, thanks. I note your point about the presiding officer may relinquish the chair to speak in debate. My understanding is also, referring to your previous slide, that the chair does not make any motions. Is that
That is correct.
accurate?
That is correct, unless you have rules that say otherwise. So everything I'm going to preface, unless you have a rule that says otherwise, you're using the rules in your parliamentary authority. And in your parliamentary authority, during your regular meeting, the presiding officer does not make motions. And speaking in debate, the presiding officer would have to step out of the chair, and the next ranking officer would handle that portion of debate and take it to the vote. And then that person could return to the chair. But again, unless you have rules that say otherwise, I want to make sure that I'm emphasizing that. Quorum. If you follow the rules of debate, should not be called to order. It's usually the issue, not the person that is out of order. If it happens that a person is constantly being disruptive, the chair can call a member to order. Basically, that's a point of order about indecorum. And if the chair fails to do so, any member can rise. But if you're in your meeting and everything is handled seated, a member can basically let it be known that they are calling the member to order. Again, that is a point of order being raised about indecorum. The unanimous consent. There's no objection. That's a way that your board can make a decision without having to take a formal vote. The chair would say, if there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. If there's no objection, we will adopt the minutes as presented or amended. The chair would pause. If there is an objection, it only takes one member to object. You would begin with step 4 of the 6 steps to handle the motions. You would open up that motion for debate. The chair will assume the motion once there is an objection, that someone wants to discuss it. The chair would go to debate, and then once it appears that debate has ended, the chair would put the motion to a vote, and then the chair would announce the results. Now, I'm saying the chair, it could be that the presiding officer asks the secretary to do certain things. So whatever is routine for your board is what you would do. The robbers police are not going to come in and arrest anyone because the secretary did it as opposed to the chair. And these are 5 motions that everyone should know. And again, I'll be sending some supplemental information. Call for the orders of the day. 1 member can get you back on the agenda. Request for information, that used to be known as point of information. You hear some people say point of clarification. You're asking a question to get additional information. What, when, how, why? You're asking a question. Parliamentary inquiry, is it in order to do this at that time? You're asking a question. Point of order, which is Woody's favorite motion. You believe that the rules have been broken. You are making a point of order that the rules have been broken. And previous question, that is the motion that's going to stop debate. Previous question requires a second. There's no discussion. And then a vote is taken first, whether or not you're going to stop debate. And then from there, the immediately pending question. So someone asked a question earlier about motions that don't require a second. The top 4 do not require a second. So a single member can make those motions. Amendments in general. Amendments change words or groups of words. You just need to specify where in the sentence. So you insert between this word or that word, and everyone will be getting a copy of the PowerPoint, or you add, you always add at the end, you strike out words, strike out and insert words. Substitute, you're talking about a paragraph. There are primary and secondary amendments if the motion is such that can be amended, and you process them in the reverse order. Think of the ladder again. The secondary, the primary, and then the main motion is amended. And it's always a majority vote to adopt the primary and secondary amendments unless your governing documents say something otherwise. These are the three main types or saving basics that are used: insert or add, strike out, and strike out and insert. So I've included some language about using unanimous consent when it comes to making amendments. First, putting the questions, it is moved and seconded to insert, add, strike out, or strike out and insert, and you put that there. And this is the most formal language. If the amendment is adopted, the motion will be to, and you would describe, and that's what the presiding officer would say. If you're using unanimous consent, if there is no objection, the amendment will be adopted. That's really simple, right? You pause to wait for that objection. And if there is none, there being no objection, the amendment is adopted. And the question is now on the main motion, because amendments are usually at least 2 steps, and then repeating what I said earlier about if there is an objection to the motion or to an amendment, what would happen there. Friendly amendment. Yeah, it's a myth of sorts. You know, once the motion no longer belongs to the maker and you're at the presiding officer is at step 3 in making a motion, once you get to the discussion, there is no need to ask the maker to accept a friendly amendment. The presider should know this and move through the 6 steps to processing a motion. So that means that the presider should pick up at step 4. If the motion is able to be amended, pick up there, assume that motion, and then move forward through that. So it's really important that when the chair, the presider, whatever the title is, the person that is conducting the meeting, that when they hear friendly amendment, first thing they think of, where are we in the steps to making a motion? Once you're already past step 3, you know it doesn't belong to that person that made it, and you move on from there. Just some general statements about amendments. Adoption of an amendment does not automatically change the main motion. So you keep that separate. It's the amendment. So basically you're asking yourself, or the group is asking, shall I change the words in the amendment? So you're going to strike out and insert, or add. Those are the functions that you're using for the amendment. Once that decision has been made and you've adopted it, then you need to decide those words that we just struck out, added, or inserted, shall they be included or removed from the main motion? And so then you're making a final decision on that. So we've adopted the amendment. Shall we apply it to the main motion is what you're asking there. So you have at least 2 steps. If you have a primary and a secondary amendment, you would have gone through 3 steps, to get back to the main motion. So it's important that you know that once an amendment is adopted, it doesn't end there. You still have to deal with the main motion. Shall we apply the changes to the main motion is the basic question that you're asking yourself. And there are times when unanimous consent can be used to do that, to make it that much simpler without having to vote. So again, with parliamentary procedure and getting to know your way around amendments, it takes a little time to get the practice to make sure you get the steps right. But once you get them right, and usually it amounts to writing it down as you're going along. Once you get it, you'll know it and you don't have any problem with it. But again, shall we make the changes? Then shall we apply the changes to the main motion? So in the most simple terms, that's the way I can describe it to you. So we have a demonstration. So I've written down some names. So is Jackie still here? Jackie
Yes, she is.
Okay,
She
so
is here.
Jackie's going to be the president.
Oh, no.
Member A, Kathleen from Delaware. They warned you that I would do this. They warned you. Kathleen from Delaware, are you still here? Kathleen?
She has in the comments that she had
She had to
to
move
go to a
away.
different meeting and will be back.
Okay, so Woody, you're gonna get member A.
Got that, Woody?
No, I think you should let the new members participate. 'Cause
Okay, I'm going down the list, you know.
Go ahead.
Okay, okay, member A, Tom from Maine. Is Tom still here? Tom?
I don't think Tom is still with us, unfortunately.
Okay, we're still trying to get member A.
Member A, yeah.
So Ken from Hawaii, is Ken still here?
Looks like Ken is.
Yes, I am.
There you go.
Okay, so Ken, you're gonna be member A.
Okay.
So Steve from Kentucky. You're
Here.
here? Okay, so you're going to be member B. And is it Nike from Illinois?
Nikki.
Nikki. Okay, Nikki, you're going to be member C.
Okay, yeah, I just see it now.
Okay. So basically with this script, there'll be some places where you'll ad lib and have a little fun with it. And so, Madam President, when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. Do I say is new business?
And what's in the language column, that's what you're going to read out.
Okay.
And so let me just say, so we have Madam President, or you can say Madam Chair or whatever. We never know who's going to be participating. So that's where you see that a decision hasn't been made. We know that Jackie is the president.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. The next item of business is new business.
Ken?
Madam Chair,
The chair recognizes member A.
I move that we have a barbecue after the end of this training.
I second that.
It is moved and second that we have a barbecue after the end of this training. Is there any discussion?
And read the next sentence.
The chair recognizes the maker of the motion to speak first.
So can you give us a read? Uh-huh.
Yeah. Is this? Sorry, is there?
Ken, I don't think it's written out for you.
It
Okay,
is not written out, no.
okay.
So just go ahead.
Improvise.
I just wondering, sorry.
This is improv.
Okay. Madam Chair, I believe that it's an opportunity for the members to have a chance to get together, you know, a little opportunity to share, you know, information and at least be able to, in a more informal setting, you know, feel an opportunity or have an opportunity to meet and discuss with other members, you know, items in an informal way.
Is there any further discussion?
Madam Chairman,
The chair recognizes member B.
I wasn't prepared to stay for a barbecue at the end of this session. So maybe we need to have it, maybe when we meet again and not do that this evening.
Steve, do you see what member B has to say?
He was improvising.
Yeah, he was.
No, but
Oh, I
he
see
doesn't-
now.
He
Okay,
doesn't have the improvised note, okay?
yeah. I don't eat red meat. That's not true, but I don't. And I moved to amend the motion by striking out barbecue and insert fish fry.
Second,
It is moved in second to amend the main motion by striking out barbecue and inserting fish fry. If the amendment is adopted, the main motion would read that we have a fish fry after the end of this training. The question is on striking out barbecue and inserting fish fry. Is there any discussion? The chair recognizes the maker of the amendment to speak.
Now you get to improvise.
I guess that's B.
Mhm.
I thought this was supposed to be the maker of the motion, but that's okay. Again, I really believe we need to do the fish fry and stay away from the red meat. And I think everybody can participate. And I think it'd be much better to do the fish fry.
Is there further discussion? The question is on the amendment to strike out barbecue and inserting fish fry. Those in favor of striking out barbecue instead and inserting fish fry, use the green check mark icon. Those opposed, use the red X icon.
And hold on, so everyone, go to your reaction buttons. And I'm going to need help with the staff members, if you could give us the counts of green check marks and red X's.
So far, there's 11 green check marks and 2 red X's.
Okay, so that's those are your answers, Madam President.
There are 11 in the affirmative and 2 in the negative, and the amendment is adopted. The question is now on the main motion as amended, that we have a fish fry / barbecue at the end of this training.
And now that the decision has been made, you can eliminate barbecue.
Ah, got it. Okay. I'm going to say that again. The question is now on the main motion as amended, that we have a fish fry after the end of this training. Those in favor of the main motion as amended, raise the thumbs up icon. And those opposed, raise the thumbs down icon. Should I just,
And we're going to get assistance.
okay.
So if you guys could use either the thumbs up or the thumbs down. And the staff is going to assist us with the count.
There are 10 thumbs up and no thumbs down.
Madam President.
There were 10 in the affirmative and 0 in the negative. As the main motion as amended is adopted, we will have a fish fry after the end of this meeting, end of this training.
Thank you. Thank you all for your participation. That was good. So what we tried to demonstrate is, and even though the most formal language was used, that's how you would process through an amendment. And the question became, what member B was asking, I thought that the maker of the motion, but an amendment, quite frankly, is a motion. And you did amend the main motion, or you put on the floor to amend the main motion from the barbecue to the fish fry. So you were the maker of that particular amendment. So that's where we were there. So let's talk about roll call voting. And I believe that most of you will experience using this at most times. Members usually respond aye or yes for an affirmative vote, and members will respond no for a negative vote. Some people say nay. Nay is the same thing as no. And members responding pass are not ready to vote. And the secretary or the recording member goes through the list and returns to that member for a response. Members responding present intend to abstain, and the chair is called on last to cast a vote. The secretary or the recording member tallies the counts of the votes in favor, opposed, or abstaining, and then the chair will announce or declare the results of the vote. And so with roll call voting, it does take precedence over the motion being voted on, can be applied to any motion. And I believe that there are quite a few school boards that vote by roll call voting as part of their regular procedure. Some may be raising hands, but some may be using roll call votes throughout the meeting. And if someone is going to make a motion that the vote be taken by a roll call vote, it cannot interrupt the speaker, meaning the person has to be recognized. And that is if you don't use roll call votes routinely, the person has to be recognized by the chair. And when it's their turn to speak, then they would make the motion to that the vote be taken by roll call. It does require a second. And whether or not you're going to take a roll call vote is not debatable. And I put the section in Robert's Rules of Order, but there is information about a brief allowable explanation that could be there. It is amendable, and it's a majority vote that it requires for adoption. I put in information about abstentions because depending on what your governing documents say, because you serve the public, it is probably important that if you are abstaining, that's a part of the record. So I put that there so that you can see the references in Robert's Rules of Order. You should consult your governing documents also. So we're just about at the end. I really do try to keep on time, to keep down to the time in which you've asked me to, because if we spend too much time, then you all won't have me back again. Oh, I don't want you to see that yet. And so for some odd reason, number one is cut off. That's okay. If you take a few minutes to do this red word scramble, you'll have the answers in your in the PowerPoint when you get it. And I'll just adjust the slide to make sure that you see them all. But if you take about 3 minutes for the others that you can see. It's about 2:09 now. And what about if I give you until 2:14? So that's about 5 minutes. You probably won't need it.
And I think, Darlene, the intention is that these are scrambled words, right? And
scrambled words that most of them we have encountered in our training today. Yes.
Got it. Does anybody have any questions about this exercise as you do it? Very good.
This is Janet. Could I just ask a quick question while others might be thinking about this? In our meetings, whenever we go into executive session, we always do a roll call vote. And often it's said that it is required to do a roll call vote to go into executive session. Is that part of parliamentary procedure? Is that just part of the way our board does business?
I think it's the way that your board does business, because in order to go into executive session, especially if it wasn't on the agenda already, that just requires a majority vote, and that could be done by voice vote or whatever. It doesn't have to be a roll call vote. So I believe that that's the way that you all do business.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So you have about 3 minutes left, and I'm expecting that you guys will get most of them. You have about 2 more minutes. Unless everybody's done. And there's 1 more minute. So would you be upset if I just move to the answers?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. And so, like I said, I have to readjust the slide on the PowerPoint for number 1, so you don't see that. But when you get the slide deck, you'll see it. Number 2 was debate. 3 was secondary amendment. 4 was quorum. 5, I moved to. 6, previous question. 7, primary amendment. Rescind, we did not have a full discussion about that, but it's one of the bring back motions. Withdraw the motion. Abusive chair, we did not have a discussion about that, but that's something that if you are the presider that you need to be aware of. Decorum. Seek recognition. Main motion. Point of order, and reconsider. Reconsider, I mentioned when we talked about, I mentioned briefly when we talked about the bring back motions. But you'll get a copy of this. So, are there any questions that we haven't covered already? Please feel free to unmute and ask your question. And I will say that with this is just a little snack size bite of parliamentary procedure. It certainly can be more of a 4 or 5 course meal, but today just wanted to basically introduce to some, and for some who do have some experience with it, to be able to take you a little further. Hopefully there were things today, not necessarily that you aren't doing correctly, but you see that can be done in a different way to help make your meetings more efficient. So I'm hoping that that is going to be your takeaway today.
Darlene, what I have found is that brand new people to meetings that have structure to them will listen to a presentation like this and they'll kind of get it, but it won't really have meaning until they've gone through a couple of meetings. And I think there are probably a few of you who have in fact been through. Obviously, there are some very experienced members on this call, and it's ironically, they're the ones that have been asking a lot of the questions. But it may be that, you have to get 2 or 3 meetings in to really, for it to really sink in how this works and how it helps to keep your meetings in a manageable, right? It's made to help conduct the business in an orderly fashion so that you don't have that chaotic, 15-hour meeting that poor Mr. Robert had, back in the day. So it may be that you appreciated this conversation, but until you have a few meetings, you really don't know how it actually fits or what questions you might have. And I think one of the keys is just to listen a lot. Listen and see how others who have more experience than you behave and how they act, and then pick up those habits. But then don't hesitate to ask people for more information. Sometimes that if you have a very experienced chair, after the meeting is over, go up to the chair and maybe ask that person questions. You can ask your board executive about, helping you and clarifying some of the different parliamentary points. If you need NASBE's help, you should never hesitate to reach out to us and say, hey, at our last meeting, this happened in this particular way, and I'm just curious about understanding what these different things meant. You can read it for yourself in Robert's Rules of Orders. We have a couple extra copies here. I think there's an online version that you can access. So if you're kind of nerdy about wanting to dig into exactly what things are said, sometimes there are some cheat sheets about different motions and things like that are published as well. So never hesitate to seek clarification. Your board executive may also be a great source of clarification about parliamentary procedure. And if not, they can help you track down answers to your questions or ask those questions to NASB, because we often are called on to help. Again, our goal is to help support board work, and we're often doing parliamentary procedure, either trainings or assisting people in understanding it. So given that, that's my way of letting you think. And for those of you who may have already had a meeting or two, do you have any particular questions or want to point to any practices that you think you're still confused about?
Darlene?
Lauren has added in the chat a few observations. Go ahead, Fern.
Darlene, with President Paulo mentioning cheat sheets, I'm just wondering, instead of having a Robert's Rules of Order manual next to us when we conduct meetings, is there a particular cheat sheet or any like brief summary of motions, amendments, and things that would be just helpful for a chair to have, easily accessible in a meeting in case he or she would be questioning, what should I be doing in this particular instance? Is there anything that you can think of that would be helpful for us to keep handy?
And I placed in the chat one of the cheat sheets that I had talked about. And then there's also the In Brief book, which is in its 3rd edition from Robert's Rules of Order, which is a much smaller book, and it has information in it. And if my arms were longer, actually, yeah, I'm able to do that. Because as a parliamentarian, I usually walk around with these things in my bag. But this is the 3rd edition, and it's a much smaller book that has different phrases and information in it. And so I would recommend that you start with this, so that this is the 3rd edition of In Brief. And you can get it on Amazon or at your local bookstore, but the reading this will be helpful to you. And the key is going to be practice. If you're new to this, and especially if you belong to other organizations, for some people, even though you have your school board function, which is a little different than most nonprofits, because again, you answer to the public in ways that regular nonprofits don't. So that knowing that and making sure you have your rules and assisting you with the Robert's Rules of Order, I would suggest the In Brief first, and also Jim Slaughter. You'll see the link. And does everyone see the link in the chat?
Yes.
And that gives you the motions, some of the motions that we talked about today. On one side are the motions that are in rank, and then on the other side are the incidental motions that come up incidentally. And so and I see the notice from Valerie that also NASBE has this brief on the website. So there's information that's going to be there for you, but I would say just kind of take the time to kind of read through it. It gets better when you practice. You become more proficient once you practice. It's not something that you're expected to know in one day. You just can't get it in one day.
Yeah.
However, if you practice it, and like I said, with my client, they all took a motion. And so they got their motion. And so when that came up and a point of order was necessary, we just kind of looked over and that person was at the mic or whatever. It just takes practice. And most of your meetings should be able to have some informality to what you're doing. I don't recommend that you're so informal that you're just having such a good time that your constituents think that you're not doing any work. So again, there's a balance there, but it should be in such a way that you enjoy the work that you're doing, but you're able to do it in an efficient manner because everyone is very collegial with everyone, and you're following the rules and you're getting work done, and that's the key. There is no written rule where you have to be, just staunch and never having a time where you can enjoy being in the company, albeit on a virtual platform or if you're in person. But just be able to do it and do it in such a way and know that the work that you've done, that it is representative of the efforts that you made, and that you set out to do a good job, and you're doing a good job. And I just think when it's all said and done, that's what people want to know.
Darlene, I really like this grid. And Fern, you remind me, it'd be interesting to have a grid that has a column like, what does the chair do? Because I see sometimes a chair will not, especially if it's a more obscure motion, they won't exactly know like what to do with it. And then how to maintain the order, right? So if there's a motion and then a motion to amend and then motion to amend the amendment, you have to keep track of where you are so that you then dispense with each of those in the sequence in which it, or in the reverse order in which it comes to you, right? The last one has to be dealt with. You have to amend the amendment first, then vote on the amendment, then vote on the motion as amended, and et cetera, et cetera. So I wonder, we can look around and see if there's anything that's more of a chair's guide to different motions.
And on the chart that I had, it does have basically what vote, and from there, there sometimes you'll see that when a vote is involved, that's the body. But if the chair makes a decision, that's based on the chair's ruling or the chair's opinion or something. But that also, again, takes practice. Robert's Rules of Order actually contains all that information, but the big book is something that until you get comfortable with it, I would start with in brief. It does give some information, and it does have the references to the big book, the 12th edition, if you need more information. But practice and having meetings and observing other meetings, when you're not doing your school board functions, the other organizations that you may belong to, just kind of observe and take notes there. You'll see some things that you'll say, oh no, I'm never going to do this. But there'll be some other things that you will be able to incorporate in your meetings. So again, it's not one size fit all.
Good. Darlene, thank you so very, very much. Always delightful to listen to you. I think I learn something every time myself. I'm sure our board members who've been around also do, because we all run into parliamentary issues from time to time. Keep up the great work you do.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, let's give it a little bit of a round of applause.
But we're going to go through a session on leading with evidence. We'll have about 20 minutes to talk through it. And fair warning, I do have a little activity for us at the end, and I'm sure you will ace the activity, but I want to give you fair warning. I might be calling on you all for that. So my name is Abby Paz, and I serve as Director of Strategic Initiatives and Planning here at NASBE. Before I get started, I do want to disclose the fact that I have a dog who's getting over pneumonia. So you might hear some noise in the background. This is commentary on my presentation skills and not commentary on his opinions about the power of data for use by state boards of education. So why we thought this was such an important topic for new board members to talk about leading with evidence and using data and evidence and research and policy making for education. Well, I think it's summed up in the first quote that we have on this particular screen: "In God we trust, all others bring data." So why does data and evidence matter so much? Why does data and evidence matter so much to state boards of education? Well, the first thing that it does is it helps us to identify real problems that need our attention. I often talk about data bringing a conscience to discussions and policy making because it compels action. It can shine a spotlight on problems that deserve our attention, particularly problems where we have disparities between groups of students that compels action and discussion by state boards of education. It also helps state boards to weigh and compare different policy solutions that are in their toolkit to find out what really is going to work for their unique state context and their unique student environment and context. One of the powerful aspects of data is it helps to build consensus. When we use data, when we use fact-based conversations, when we use trusted data sources, we're building a shared understanding of the problem that we're trying to solve, which really helps to build consensus amongst people who may have very different political views. Now, we can disagree and probably will disagree on how to solve that problem. But the very basic thing, we're building consensus around what the problem is that is fundamental part of the building blocks to having a civil discourse in education. We can also use data to justify our policy decisions. Data is often publicly available and widely accessible. You can point to it. You can point to it when you're having conversations with legislatures. You can point to it when you're having conversations with school board members, members of the school community, as well as parents and families, teachers and administrators. Data is also public and often used as a point of reference in many state strategic plans to draw attention to why the state is prioritizing a particular issue and also holding itself accountable for the outcomes it is pledged to deliver on. One of the most important aspects about data, though, is when we use evidence, when we use data, our decisions are more informed. And when our decisions are more informed, students benefit. So this is critically important for state boards to know. And even though data can be scary, even though data can be overwhelming, we're going to give you some simple tools to be able to use data and to become quality consumers of information. The quote that I often like to share and talk about is, if we have data, let's use data. But if we have opinions, let's use mine. And that tends to be because everybody thinks their opinion is the best. But what we want to do is use data because it really does change the conversation about education policy making. So the Every Student Succeeds Act has a game changer in it. I'm sure you're all aware about the federal legislation that's the Every Student Succeeds Act. And what it did is it required evidence-based interventions. You might say, well, Abby, what's an evidence-based intervention? An evidence-based intervention is really making sure that whatever that intervention strategy or activity is demonstrates statistically significant effect upon improving student outcomes. What this really means is show me the data. Show me the evidence that this intervention, this strategy is going to make a difference in a positive aspect for our kids. That's a requirement of ESSA for interventions. But ESSA also helps us too. It helps us figure out and gives us tools for what's the quality of that evidence, because there are different levels and tiers of evidence within ESSA. There's strong, moderate, and promising. And we'll talk through them because I think it's important to understand the quality of evidence that we're using when we're talking about show me the data that's going to result in a statistically significant positive outcome for kids. All of these have to be well designed and well implemented. When we talk about strong, that's the highest level of evidence, that's the most rigorous one. And this is an experimental study. And what is an experimental study? It's typically when you have a treatment group and a control group, and you're going to randomly assign students to that treatment group and to that control group. The objective here is to really get at causation. How do we know that this intervention is actually causing positive student outcomes too? But we often find in education that randomized control trial, that idea to randomly assign students to a treatment group or control group, doesn't always work out. For example, let's think about the treatment being suspension or expulsion. If you're going to randomly assign students to a suspension or expulsion, you might have parents raising their hands with some questions about this too. So the ESSA also provides us with moderate evidence, which is a quasi-experimental study. That's a big word, but let's unpack it. A quasi-experimental study tries to do the same thing as this experimental study, but with a different technique. You're still going to have a treatment group and a control group, what you're going to look for is, rather than randomly assigning students to that treatment group or control group, you're going to find 2 districts, 2 schools, 2 pots of kids that are relatively the same in terms of student demographics, school context, history of academic achievement, one of which is using the intervention, one of which is not. So you can still get at much of the aspects of causation and understanding and unpacking how that intervention is influencing student outcomes without that randomized control trial too. Larger states have this as a potential possibility too, as well. So quasi-experimental design, about 2 comparator situations, 1 treatment group, 1 control group. There's also this idea of promising evidence. And this is actually most likely what you will see as a state board member too. Promising evidence is about correlational data. You're going to get aggregate school level data, and you're going to see that one indicator may be moving up and another indicator may be moving up. Now, you can't be sure that one is causing the impact upon the other, but you know that they're correlated together. So you'll see things like an increase in chronic absenteeism being correlated with an increased suspension. You'll see things like teachers in their 1st and 2nd year and the impact upon student achievement. You'll see all of this within the data, but you can't necessarily, with correlational data, make the link to causation. There's also another level of evidence that I like to call a good idea. It's much more than this, but I think it's really important for state board members to know about, especially as we think about the pandemic and innovations that have happened during the pandemic. What you do is this basically looks at the rationale, the justification that you have to try out a new intervention. There may be a strong study or a moderate study out there that shows that there's a compelling impact upon student achievement or student outcomes for an intervention or strategy, but you want to change it up. You have a unique student context, or you have a unique environment like a pandemic, and you want to be able to make the case that you're going to adhere to the core tenets of that research study. Tweak to bed, new context, new intervention, new strategy for implementation. But the reasonable person could justify that the positive outcome and results in the research study could be reasonably assured in your situation with your modifications. But you're also going to be pairing this with ongoing evaluation. I think this is really important, especially as we look back to the pandemic, where we look almost as a cafeteria style, the best that we knew about research from high dosage tutoring, from professional learning, high quality professional learning, from virtual environments, and applied it to a new context and learned a lot. So that don't think that ESSA's tiers of evidence are boxed in. We're constantly building the field of evidence through multiple different strategies. Now, if I've gotten you excited about it, you might ask yourself, where can you find data and evidence? And quite frankly, you can find it anywhere. You can find it at the National Center for Education Statistics. You can find it in the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is the graph up to the left-hand corner for the state boards of education, states of education's academic achievement. You can find it in newspapers, in research studies, institutions of higher education, advocacy organizations, state departments of education, US departments of education. Quite frankly, data is everywhere. And there's so much data out there that you can find information on revenues, expenditures, teacher diversity, teacher certification, school climate and culture, academic achievement across a multitude of subjects. But what you as state board members are really charged with is, unfortunately, dealing with the data challenges. How do you determine that of all that data out there, whether the data that you're looking at is sound? And how do you make sense of conflicting findings from different research studies? Or one research study says something about a positive outcome for students, and another research study maybe says there's a negative outcome for students for a particular intervention. And finally, I don't know how long you've been at State Board of Education meetings, but sometimes you'll ask the SCA for information, for data about a policy topic, and you'll get reams of information or Excel tabs with multiple tabs and multiple scrolling through of data. We're lovely individuals to be able to have that data, but turning those reams of data into actionable information is one of the challenges. Even with all these challenges, I want to draw your attention to the quote at the bottom. Errors using inadequate data are much less than using no data at all. And we're going to tackle these challenges and give you some strategies for each of these 3 buckets to be able to use and address data within your state board meetings. So first thing on the quality of data, how do you know that the data you're using is sound? Well, the first thing that you want to ask is, what's the source of the data? And the best source of data out there is actually federal statistical agencies. Federal statistical agencies have a great deal of power. They're insulated from the political realms of certain department agencies. They are supposed to be impartial arbitrators of the facts and data and statistics out there. And with that great power comes great responsibility. They are charged to uphold a high degree of quality of their information and data, to use robust and rigorous research protocols. Federal statistical agencies are probably pretty familiar to you. Things like the US Census Bureau, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the Institute for Educational Sciences, the National Center for Educational Statistics. To kind of give you a sense of that level of power, when NCS, or the National Center for Education Statistics, releases a report, they inform the secretary of that release of the report. They don't ask for approval, they don't ask for comment. They inform the secretary that the report is going out the door. And I want to draw your attention to one quote here, and this is a favorite quote of mine simply because I really do think this echoes the power of statistical agencies from a former NCS commissioner. It says, to be credible, a statistical agency must be clearly impartial. It must avoid even the appearance that its collection and reporting of data might be manipulated by political purposes. So federal statistical agencies are the best source of data. But asking simple questions of what's your source is also important. Questions, as we know, are a powerful tool for state board members. And those questions you can use when you're looking at data and determining whether or not that data is sound. I love when state board members ask, what data do we have on this topic too? If we're having a period of conversation about a policy issue, what does the data tell us and what data do we have? But just as importantly, are what caveats are there around that data? So for example, I think many of you, just as I was asking a lot of questions about how our students were doing during the pandemic. How were they achieving academically? What were their needs? Well, I think we have some data on this, but there was an important note about what the caveats were around the data. Who was missing from that data? Was that data actually comparable to years prior? What were the caveats around that data? Really important for making sure that we're using the data soundly. Asking questions about whether or not there's evidence that a policy will be successful always make me happy when I hear that in state board meetings. Because what you're really trying to get at is determining whether or not there are different outcomes for different contexts or circumstances, determining whether or not a policy solution is right for the kids and the culture within your state. But data is about stories. And even though we have data and information and research and reports, the power of convening is critically important for state boards of education. Bringing together researchers, practitioners to talk about the data, to see if we're actually hearing the same stories in those conversations as this data is trying to tell us the story of educational experiences for kids. To learn the context of the data is the absolute strongest case that can be made for a policy decision or discussion grounded in data and evidence. I love it when state boards have a conversation about a policy issue, but then leave the boardroom to actually have conversations with practitioners. It adds a level of nuance, a level of next level questioning when you combine the numbers and the facts with the people they represent to unpack and better understand an issue and problem. It gives you the information that you need to design the best policy solution. One of the challenges that we also talked about was when you can have conflicting research reports. Study A says one positive outcome, study B says a negative outcome for the same intervention. Now, it very well may be that both study A and study B are of high quality, but they have different study designs, different contexts to them. One of the first questions you want to ask is the research of quality within those studies? And that can be a little daunting sometimes, but we're going to give you 3 simple questions to ask about that helps to unpack the quality of the research. The first thing you want to think about is objectivity too. Does the researcher show evidence of any pre-existing bias or policy agenda? There's a quote at the bottom that gets at this: torture the data and it will confess to anything too. We have a little exercise on this at the end. But I don't want to preclude you from, there are researchers and evidence out there that they do have an upfront bias, an advocacy organization that's campaigning for a particular attention towards a particular group of kids. If they're disclosive of that, if they're upfront about that, and their research does not necessarily allow that bias to impact the quality of the study design or the findings, that's okay. You're looking for transparency and objectivity here. You also want to look at the study design. The study designs can be complex, randomized controlled trials, quasi-experimental studies. But the real question that you're trying to get at is the population sample large enough and diverse enough to justify drawing broad conclusions about how this is going to work within your state for your kids? Fundamental question that I think state boards can ask about research is really at the end on the findings. Kind of take off all the mathematical equations and ask yourself, are the results convincing? Do the results make sense? Those simple questions can unpack not only quality of research, but also the soundness of the data. So for example, in your conversations that you've had with constituents about the data and the issues that they have, does that jive with what you're seeing? Or is the research missing some critical piece and critical aspect that you learned about within your own state conversations that's missing from the research? And do the results make sense? As I said, can have a huge impact, not only for the quality of the research, but the soundness of the data. The story that I like to often tell is we were exploring different aspects for early literacy achievement at the US Department of Education ages ago, looking at different states, their different districts and their outcomes that we were seeing. And there was a particular one where we were seeing some interesting patterns and different patterns in the data, where we had very low rates of achievement within early literacy in the elementary and earlier grades, but wowzers, they were knocking it off the charts in middle and high schools. When we were having conversations with districts too, they were so proud of the work in early literacy, but that wasn't matching what we were seeing in the data. So it had us scratching our heads. Something here wasn't making sense. Was it an implementation fidelity issue? We had conversations because data tells the story. And quite frankly, people are valuable. And so when you say the results don't make sense, sometimes there's a goof, there's a data quality issue. In conversations with the state, in conversations with a particular set of districts, they realized they had flips and zeros. Rather than reporting 30% of students had achieved state academic standards within early literacy, they reported 3% versus 30%. So simply asking the question, do the results make sense, help you to unpack so much more. So don't be intimidated to ask that question. Then you also want to ask questions about using data. Using data, I emphasize so much because it helps us to turn that kind of data set into actionable and compelling information. As excited as I am about using data, as excited as I get about the potential for data to make an impact on positive outcomes for kids, I'm not about data for data's sake. We want to ask the question, what is the purpose for this data? And that gets at an important issue about validity. Validity is about ensuring that the evidence supports using the data for its intended purpose. Who's using this data, towards what end, for what actions is a powerful question to be asking about data. We also want to think about, is the measure fair? Is it accessible? Consider student context that you're within your state, students with disabilities, English learners, culturally diverse perspectives, students who are experiencing homelessness, migrant students, students in the foster care system. All of these you want to think about. Is it a fair and accessible measure for students across a wide range of diverse circumstances? Then you also want to think about the powerful action, about how data gives us the conscience that compels action. Who is using this information and for what actions? Does the data tell a story that catalyzes our actions? Because it's the actions by administrators and teachers and students and parents that really are the drivers of change for a better student experience for our kids. And for a board member, we want to think about what data and what actions, but importantly, do they have the resources and capacity to build and empower educators to take those actions? Do schools have what they need to act on the data? Is a fundamental question. I will also add, the quote at the end says that data that is loved tends to survive. So I want you to think about the fact that data that's used tends to be the highest quality information. But what's the data that you're going to love as a state board member? What's the data that you're going to use on a regular basis for what purpose, for what actions, and towards what end? Constantly be thinking about what's the purpose to our data, stay focused in on that question. And we're also going to go through some tips on using data too. First one, Correlation is not equal to causation. Just because two indicators are pointing in the same direction or a different direction does not necessarily mean one is causing the other. For those, we need that strong or moderate design of the study. Second is no data is perfect. I gotta be honest with you. Education data can get messy. In fact, you kind of need to get comfortable with the ish statement. So for example, if you were to ask me how many schools there are, how many students there are, how many districts there are, I'm going to tell you there are about 100,000-ish schools. I'm going to tell you there are about 50 million-ish kids in the public education system. And I'm going to tell you there are anywhere from 14,000 to 17,000 school districts out there. Why am I saying ish? Why am I equivocating this? Education data for most of our schools and districts is pretty straightforward. But we've got some complex systems out there. For example, for districts, we have districts that don't operate schools. We have districts that don't have any students who are actually in attendance of them. That gives us an insight on why that number can shift between 14,000 and 17,000 for school districts. So knowing the caveats and the errors potentially in the data to make sure we're using the right data for the right purpose towards the right end is really important. But we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good out there too. We might find that in that one case of the state that made a flip-flop, their data for middle school and high school was accurate, and that was a story that we needed to tell. So don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. When you do find data quality issues, if they are not substantially rampant throughout the entire data set, they're a small proportion. Make sure that you're spending time to really unpack and understand the data the story is trying to tell. Put it a little bit more pragmatically, I think we can all look back at the last year of academic assessment data too. It wasn't perfect by any way, shape, or form. The context and environment to which states administered their assessments was sometimes very different than in prior years. Even though that data wasn't perfect, I think it told us an unimpeachable story that students, without a doubt, have been significantly impacted by unfinished learning. And that leads us to our next point, with unmasking variation hidden by averages. Oftentimes, state board members will raise a question. They'll ask for some data point. How are our kids doing on X? You'll get one number of response. I encourage you to peel back that onion, ask for more numbers, disaggregate that data. So for example, the data that we do have on academic achievement, so different, tells such a different story between our elementary students, our middle school, and our high school students. It tells a very different story between reading and mathematics during the pandemic. It tells a very different story between students who are wealthy and their disadvantaged peers. It tells a very different story between students who are disabled and their non-disabled peers. Go on even further. When we look at our students with disabilities population, sometimes it tells a very different story for students who are visually impaired or hearing impaired versus students who have a traumatic brain injury or students who are autistic. Unpacking that variation hidden by averages is really key for a state board member to design the right solution to better understand the problem they're trying to unpack and understand so that policy solution fits the problem. But even as we're digging into all of that data, we want to consider data privacy. The rule here is basically to do no harm. As you're getting to the small sample sizes, every time that you're in public thinking about using data or talking about data, you want to ask yourself, are you at risk of revealing individually identifiable information about an individual student? Because that, to me, is something we want to avoid at all costs, because that individual student is someone we never want to harm. We want to use data to inform policy, but we don't want to disclose individually personal identifiable information. Why is that important? Because data is more than numbers. Data tells a story. It tells stories about our student experience, it tells stories about our teachers' experience, and tells stories about the schools within our state. So all that being said is to keep an open mind when we talk about data. We really do want to think about data and how it can be used towards what purpose, towards what end within education policy. But we also want to think about the fact that you may ask a question. You may raise your hand within a state board meeting and say, what information do we have on this topic? And you may walk away with more questions than you started it out with. That's a good thing. That means we're learning more about the educational experience of kids so we can better design solutions to make their experience better. The quote at the end is, data are just summaries of thousands of stories. It's really impactful to tell a few of the stories to make the data helpful. Don't just walk away with the numbers. What is the story behind that? connect that back to the anecdotes and conversation that you're having with real people to understand the context of the data. Now, I flew through that pretty quickly, and I have to say, y'all are in really small windows off to the side of my screen, so feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. But our next up is our exercise. I am going to show you a graph of results and fully admit that I have tortured the data, and your job is to try to figure out how I tortured the data. This is going to be information on middle school pass rates. So for grades 7 and 8, students who enrolled in Algebra 1 and successfully passed the course. What we're going to do is compare the performance of white students compared to their American Indian peers, as well as African American students. On the slide, I have 2 charts, which I'll show you right now. Here we see that 86% of white students passed Algebra 1 in grades 7 and 8. You'll see the bars both say 86%. And then we have a bar for American Indian students and a bar for African American students. And those bars are of different sizes. Can anyone tell me how I've tortured the data to present this?
The scales are different.
Bingo! On the left-hand side, I have a scale of about 10%, 10 percentage point difference. On the right-hand side, I have a scale of about 40 percentage points. So I've tortured the data to make it look like there's a bigger difference between white students and American Indian students than there is between white students and African American students. When you actually put it on the same chart, it looks a very different story too. Here you'll actually find the pass rates for students who enroll in Algebra 1 in grades 7 and 8 are actually not very different by race ethnicity compared to pass rates for grades 9 and 10 or 11 and 12. At that level, you're going to find pass rates differences between race ethnicities of somewhere between 10 to 15 to 20%, depending upon the grade level. But you aced the question too at the end about how we are potentially torturing the data and becoming good consumers of data by asking questions about it. So I flew through that, and I think in my allotted 25 minutes, hello.
Thank you so much, Abby. Yeah, let's have one last opportunity for questions. Abby, if you stop sharing, maybe we'll see a few more faces and see if anybody has their hands raised or what have you. I'm sure any number of you can talk about data you've seen, data you've encountered, data stories that you have, research that you've used or that you've questioned and followed up on. It comes up very frequently in not only education, frankly, in just about every career area I can think of. There are issues of data and research and evidence and what have you. So one of the things we try to do is be here again as a support structure. There probably isn't a month that goes by that people may not, call us and say, hey, is there any good summary of the research on this topic or that topic? In fact, as we were talking, I pulled a couple of books off my shelf that represent summaries of research. This one is a recent book that came out. It's called Follow the Science to School: Evidence-Based Practices for Elementary Education. And the authors have compiled in 4 key categories, like little summaries of the main research that affects everything from teaching, instructional materials, time, attendance and so forth and so on. And then some of you who are teachers are familiar with John Hattie's book, Visible Learning, which is a synthesis of over 800 meta-analyses relating to achievement. There's a graph in the book that shows all the different types of interventions and their effect size, because this is another issue that often comes up in the research is, yes, but if I do that, how big an effect will it have? And when you're making trade-offs, you might have great research on 5 different things. Understanding the effect size, what level of impact it has, is an important consideration. And many times what the cost is. I might be satisfied with a slightly less impactful intervention if it's significantly less expensive than I might be, if I go in the other direction. So again, all sorts of things to think about. And, we're here as a resource. If somebody wants to better understand some of the research and evidence that might exist in a particular topic area. And we often know many other organizations that specialize in doing research, sharing research, and we can broker and partner with you to get there. Lauren, I see your hand up. Did you want to reflect on this topic?
I did. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for those recommendations. And would you just send that along to us as well, the books that you just mentioned?
Sure.
I know I've heard of at least one of them. Secondly, it is the question about source. So as those who are not from Hawaii know, we're a very large school district, probably the 10th largest in the country. And so we rely on the Department of Education. We task out to them to provide us with data in the proposals they make. But one of my concerns is that by doing that, they're making the proposals and they're giving us the data. So I'm always trying to look for data myself. So first of all, that relates to my request, Paulo, to you that you give us a couple basic things like that we might use to start getting smart, because frankly, I do not have endless amounts of time to go and research topics myself. Secondly, my question would be kind of how much is too much to ask you guys? And thirdly is, okay, if it's too much to ask you guys, when we get proposals because of Sunshine Law with literally days in advance. I mean, sometimes I'm reading hundreds of pages just a couple of days in advance when I have to vote. So me trying to go out there and try to find some other reputable data to ask good questions is really hard. So do you kind of have any thoughts and guidance about how to start that process in the limited amount of time, real lifetime we have to deal with sometimes quite difficult issues?
No, those are great.
And finally, just
questions.
thank you, Abby. That was really great. I really enjoyed it.
Great questions, Lauren. Abby, do you want to weigh in a little bit?
Sure, I can weigh in. I appreciate the statement that you had that the SCA is providing your data. And so you want to make sure it's of quality and that you really are looking at it. One of the things that you can do is to kind of compare what the SCA is providing you with what's published on the National Center for Education Statistics too. So you'll be able to kind of make sure that that's telling you the same story. What you're really looking for there is the complex term concurrent validity, is what the data is the SCA is telling you the same as another source is telling you. And NCS is a pretty easily searchable information. They're going to have the same data that the state has, but through kind of pretty rigorous quality review process too. The other thing is there are two websites that I'll put in the chat as soon as I'm done talking to. What Works Clearinghouse and Evidence for ESSA. These are great places to go that if you want high quality research. What Works Clearinghouse has that rigorous research protocols that we talked about from a federal statistical agency perspective. And Evidence for ESSA looks at all of the evidence out there about interventions categorized by the quality of their research. So that's a great place that you can do a quick search to find what's the quality of the research and what does the research say. And then I'll kind of pause there. And Paulo, do you have anything more to chime in? I'm sure I forgot more.
No, except to say a couple of things. One is sometimes you'll have advocacy organizations in the state that will also scrutinize data and perhaps provide an independent, they may say, hey, the department is saying this, but we also know, or through our data, we actually see this other thing happening that's either masked by the department's data or what have you. So trying to understand who might do that. Sometimes there's also university faculty, as either in the College of Education or others that are familiar, or maybe doing their own research on data available in the state of Hawaii that might be helpful in understanding a particular circumstance or what have you. The other thing, Lauren, we'd be happy to do is if you wanted, if there was for instance, certainly we could not be in a position to at every meeting go through all the data you're getting and try to help you sort through it. But if you want to do it once, at your next meeting, if after the meeting is over, you have a particular example of, hey, I got this, I had 3 days, what could I have done? We'd be happy to sort of counsel you through what your choices might be or something like that, because again, it's one of those things you build your own capacity not only for you to look at data through a certain eye, but then to understand where else can you go to kind of get other points of view for it to make sense. This part of the presentation is really to talk about NASBE projects and opportunities. And so as you recall, the last time I used the graphic on the left-hand side of your screen to talk about the different areas that are, ways that you could, group and frame public policy around education. We recently went through sort of a redesign of our graphic representation of these things, and we have developed the graphic on the right. It has pretty much exactly the same words to it, just organized and visually presented in a somewhat different way. So I just wanted to raise that to your attention because you're likely not to see as often the graphic we presented in session 1 and more likely to see the one that I'm showing you here on the right going forward. We're going to dive in, and the first project I'm going to have is Renee is going to talk about our Quality Principles Initiative. Renee, take it away.
Thank you, Paulo. So our work in principal quality focuses on increasing awareness and promoting policies to prepare, recruit, and retain high quality education leaders. We've been very fortunate to work for many, many years with the Wallace Foundation on much of this work. The Wallace Foundation is a well-recognized foundation. It's a philanthropic foundation, but they do a lot of their own research and commissioned research around various issues, but one of which is school leadership. A lot of the Wallace commissioned research explores the qualities of what makes an effective principal and reaffirms the positive impact that effective school leaders can have on student achievement and in fostering positive school climates. I actually forgot to mention that this work also connects with our public education positions around educator effectiveness, which the PEP committee, the Public Education Committee, is actually reviewing this year for consideration at the Delegate Assembly, our educator effectiveness positions to also include leadership as well. But getting back to the research, other recent studies and the Wallace Foundation has put out a lot of new research very, very recently. Rand just highlighted outcomes of its university principal preparation initiative. So this is an initiative to redesign and strengthen principal preparation programs through strong state, local, district, and university partnerships. Finally, the Wallace Foundation has worked a lot with the College of William and Mary's Dr. Paul Manna, and he has done a lot of research and looking at what are the state policy levers, what are the policy levers that state leaders like yourselves can use to build an ecosystem that supports strong principal pipelines. So combine all of this research. Our charge is to kind of take that research and translate it into policy actions that state leaders like yourselves can take to improve the principal pipeline and principal effectiveness. We highlight lessons, best practices, state exemplars, and we do this through webinars, publications, conference sessions. You'll see a conference session at our annual conference this fall that is focused on Wallace research as well. Paulo, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. One state exemplar that I want to point out, a lot of states are working on school leadership issues and in looking at leadership effectiveness. One state that we continuously look to and have highlighted in a lot of NASBE publications, webinars, and so forth is Missouri. And they are a prime example of using state policy levers to drive reform and comprehensive system for strengthening the principal pipeline. So you'll note here on the slide that they use 3 policy levers: standards and rules. So looking at the standards, what do principals need to know and be able to do? Rules of certification, and they also, did heavy investment to prioritize their ESSA funding, and now to an extent their federal ESSER funding as well, to kind of make some adjustments in their leadership system. So the important pieces of this is that it was state board, SEA, stakeholder kind of led. They brought all the actors together to develop this comprehensive system, and they use those policy levers. So we have, we're sharing some our publications and webinar recordings and so forth that documents a lot of these state lessons. So I really encourage you to take a look at all of those. I think I'll turn it over at this point. There are no questions. I will turn it over to my colleague Megan, I think is next.
Yeah, and before we go to Megan, let me just use this as an example to point out, highlight a few things, right? So on every one of these slide sets, you'll see in green at the upper left-hand corner, the framework category. So this is in our educators part of the framework of the way we do things. And then the project name is in red. We always look to make a linkage to our public education positions, right? That is the published document that's voted on by NASBE's Delegate Assembly that reflects what we as an organization, and what I should emphasize is the members of our organization have voted to approve as the official positions of the organization. So we're always on the lookout to make sure that our projects align to those positions. The other thing is important is to understand that we always try to, there's always tends to be a triangulation of interest when we do a project. There's generally board member and state board interests. We know all over the country, boards are focusing on quality leadership in schools because the research tells us, tying back to what Abby says, it's so strong, the importance of quality principles in making sure a school has a great instructional program and is delivering a quality experience for students. So there's the board member interest. There's usually a funder interest, right? In this case, the Wallace Foundation is doing all this great research. They want it to be used. They want it to make a difference. They see NASBE as a connection to a key group of policymakers, and so they engage with us. And so it's making sure that we have both the board members, the funders, and in some ways the staff capacity to really deliver on those projects. So with that, I will turn it over to Megan, who will talk about the Teacher Licensure Collaborative.
Thanks, Paolo, and thanks, Renee. As Paolo just said, my name is Megan Blanco, and I'm going to briefly highlight the Teacher Licensure Collaborative for you all. It is a national initiative focused on helping states and educator preparation programs revise state standards for teacher certification, preparation, professional learning, to incorporate whole child practices and ensure alignment with the science of learning and development. The science of learning and development tells us that when children experience secure relationships, skillful teaching, and personalized wraparound supports, they do better academically and have a better school experience. The initiative was launched by our partner, the Learning Policy Institute, in fall of 2021, and it currently engages 16 states. Each state has a collaborative team working towards state-specific goals. West Virginia, for instance, is developing an apprenticeship pathway for high school students into the teaching profession. To support them and the other state teams in this work, we are hosting quarterly meetings, provide on-demand technical assistance and research, and host learning cafes, which feature project partners providing briefings on specific topics. For instance, the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards brief teams on their current work to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion into national board standards. You don't have to have a state team to benefit from the collaborative's offerings. In fact, we have board members from DC and Delaware who join the quarterly all-state calls to listen and learn about what other states are doing. So if you're interested, please reach out to me. Now I'll turn the mic over to Winona.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Winona Howe, and I am the Director of Early Learning at NASBE. So I'm so glad that I was given this opportunity to talk about early childhood education with you. So this is my 8th year here working at NASBE, and I'm very proud to say that early childhood education work is the longest funded work at NASBE. So we started actually in 2015. So this is the 7th year that I'm working on this particular project. A little bit background about me. So I am the first generation immigrant to the States from China, and I was birth to age 5 educator for about 10 years. And I taught both in China and the United States before I joined NASBE. And I am a mother of 2. My son Nolan is 5 years old, and my daughter Sierra is 2 years old. So you can imagine, I think about them every day in my daily work because this is for them as well. So although I shifted my gear from teaching to education policy, it's a huge privilege for me to continue working in the ECE field, to work with all of you to provide technical assistance, policy recommendations, and on this very important topic. So I also want to acknowledge the other two great NASBE staffers who are working with me on this particular project. So Joey Hedger and Janelle Slowly. So thank you so much for supporting me and also for developing the slides actually. So before I get started, I want to do a very quick survey here. So if everybody can just find that reaction function. So my question to you is that, how many of you have young children under age 8? I give you some time to find that button. Can you raise your hand? Okay. I should do that too, but you know that already. All right, so 2. So how many of you have grandchildren that's under age 8? There you go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, 4, 5. All right. So how many of you have friends with young children under age 8? I don't see any. Oh, there you go. Very good. Thank you so much. So I hope my presentation can resonate with you, and just think about them. Think about them, like, how can we work together to provide a better future for them? Great. So I talk about this early care and education. Sometimes we use early childhood education. They're really interchangeable here. But everything under EC, I would say that's our focus. Think about kindergarten entry assessment. Think about social and emotional learning for young children. Think about those early educators. Think about early childhood data system, and also ECE and pre-12 system alignment. I would say all of that are under our huge ECE umbrella. However, right now we get funding from Foundation for Child Development and also Kellogg Foundation to focus on the educator issues. But we are still actively seeking funding to support all of the other things that I just mentioned. So the objective is really to support effective state policies toward an equitable, diverse, competent, well-compensated birth to age 8 ECE workforce. So the issue areas are educator competencies and certification, preparation programs, professional development, and also the compensation issue. Next slide, please. So I know I only given such a short time, so I do want to give you some data points here. And Abby just make a great point that data are important. So I want you to guess the numbers. So the first one is 26.8 million. Can you use the chat just to guess what's this number referring to? Put in the chat or just think about it. Okay, so Paulo, can you review the answer?
Yeah, I hope the animation works right on this. There you go, yeah.
Yeah, so that is the workforce, which is about 16% of the total US workforce that relies on childcare in order to go to work. And then 30%. Okay, show us the answer, Apollo, please. So in a recent survey, 30% of the childcare providers say they're considering quitting or closing their business just because of the lack of support, financial hardship.
Okay.
Next one, it's 101,000. Okay, there you go. So this is the childcare jobs that lost compared to the pre-pandemic level. So this is the newest data. So we're still missing all these childcare educators. and then 11.65 cents. This is the average hourly pay for the EC educator. And then the $13 average hourly pay if you work at McDonald's. And I would say when I do the research, I found out McDonald's actually have a robust plan, which is by 2024, they will increase the average pay to $15. Okay, so next slide, please. So I already talked about some data, so mainly around this issue. And also I focus a little bit on the economy because, you know, when you provide enough high quality childcare, you can really kind of boost our economy as well. We heard a lot of things about, oh, short staffed. We don't have enough people to work on particular things. I think EC can be part of the solution. So just keep that in mind when you develop some policies. And this is the slide about how you can get involved and what we have done in the past with some states. So we have an early care and education state network. The goal is really to support state board members when they develop, revise, and adopt policies to advance the EC system and its workforce. So we're still recruiting actually the fourth cohort. We just had DC and North Carolina that they decided to join as the fourth cohort, but we still have availability to host maybe one more state. So if you're interested, you're ready to lead the ECE policy initiative, please feel free to reach out to me. We're giving out a stipend, not a lot, but $10,000 for 2 years. So this is a website you can go to look for more information. And so the activities that we have done in the past, again, these are the network states that you can see. And like I said, we just added DC and North Carolina for this year. And the network is really something like state boards can shine, that you are the one who's actually leading the effort. And also you will get great opportunity to collaborate with state agencies because EC is just such a complex system. You can, you might be working with the Department of Health and Human Services. You might be working with your governor's office of early learning if your state have a standalone agency. So there are many opportunities for collaborate, and we think it's very important to ensure that ECE system is working, that we need to see that collaboration and communication across state agencies. And also you can conduct research on teacher shortages issues. Illinois actually used a stipend to commission a research on this particular topic in 2020. And also you can, I know a lot of states are thinking about maybe do some teacher licensure reform. I'm very proud of Michigan. They did it, actually. They started working with us in 2016. And by 2020, they actually successfully kind of transformed their licensure structure. They replaced their K-6 license with 2 narrower band licenses, which is pre-K to 3 and pre-K to 3rd grade, and then 3rd grade to 6th grade. And also you can adopt policies to strengthen professional development. And this is my contact information. And another way to get involved is the next slide, which is the early literacy work group. So the recent NAEP score showed that only 34% of the first grader in public school across the US, they, I think they're at or above proficiency level in reading, which is pretty shocking. And that is also a decline compared to the 2017 data. And now we are kind of coming out of a pandemic. So we can just imagine for the newest NAEP score, maybe there will be a job as well. So that's why early literacy is so important. We really want to prep our student reading at grade level before third grade, right? If you start at third, it's already too late. So that's why we established a work group this year in June. We already have 10 state board members joined. They're from 9 states. And we're still recruiting, by the way, because I think the most important meeting going to be the in-person meeting, which is scheduled on October 26th, which will be a pre-conference session along with our annual conference. So we already have a school visit scheduled. We're going to go to Wildflower Academy near Phoenix, Arizona, so we can really see those action in progress, like or progress in action, that how they use a robust curriculum in the classroom and how those teachers receive support and how the principal that they provide support to the educators. So a couple of things here, like we will also do some technical assistance. We can actually go into your state to conduct needs assessment. And our goal for the work group is to develop a final policy report. And the last bullet point is all the things we're going to talk about: the science of reading and reading intervention, birth to third grade system alignment, supporting English language learner, etc. So these are our contact information. I'll stop there. If you have any question, you can ask here, or feel free to reach out to me or any of the staffers here. Thank you. I will turn that to Paolo, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Winona. Yeah. I am the one managing the Mathematics Improvement Study Group. This is one of the things that I mentioned last time is that NASBE periodically publishes a journal called the State Education Standard. And the last edition we published was about math and science. And so one of the things I wanted to do was so many times people read and say, okay, I love these articles. What can we do? What can we do to improve the math outcomes of students in our state? And so I put a little study group together. This one too is also still open for members. And the bottom line is we really want to, a study group like this is really designed to increase awareness and understanding. It's not meant to push a particular agenda or to demand that somebody come up with a plan to actually do anything. But oftentimes, by increasing awareness and understanding, it does result in some action being taken. And we're always very respectful of each state when they do decide to take action, doing it in their own context, in their own way, maybe bringing together their statewide organizations or others in the state to sort of define what they want to do. So this is the study group, just like Winona's work group, is very kind of a soft, but awareness raising and deepening your knowledge and understanding of the things going on. And it really is derivative from our publication of the standard and also inspired by the work happening across the country in literacy. We're seeing a lot of places implementing and learning about the science of reading, doing literacy coaching and using new high quality instructional materials. And we're seeing the needle move in terms of proficiency levels increasing in literacy. And the question is, can we catalyze something like that in mathematics? So on the slide, you have a link to the study group membership. If you are so inclined to want to dig into this subject, we're going to engage with experts and state leader peers. We're going to look at data, understand better the research, understand some of the barriers to improvement, some of which are cultural. This idea that we're willing to accept that, well, little Susie's just not going to be good at math. And that's so wrong and such a myth that is so pervasive in society that we have to, reading doesn't have that problem, right? So we have to fight it on the math side a little more aggressively. And then, as we talk about exemplars and what other states are doing, we'll help support understanding what a state could do if they wanted to take further steps to drive math improvement. So that's the Math Improvement Study Group. We're getting a little bit of funding from NWEA to support this work. I'm now going to turn it over to Megan again for our Healthy School Facilities Network.
Thank you, Paolo. So with the support of the Joyce Foundation, NASBE is recruiting a network of 5 states for a new Healthy School Facilities Network. The call for applications was actually just released this Monday, and I believe Joey, my colleague, is going to throw the link into the chat box where you can learn more. We really encourage you to speak with your board chair about applying. we hope to have a robust sort of interest in participating. The deadline to apply is September 16th. The network will aim to help states increase access to healthy school buildings free from environmental harms, and to raise awareness about the opportunities to improve student health and academic success by providing healthy learning environments. Environmental harms include lead in school drinking water, insufficient heating and AC, poor air quality, which we know is a major concern as we continue to try to fight the spread of the COVID-19 virus in our school settings, and also the concern for the presence of asbestos and mold. And as states and localities face increasing instances of natural disasters, we're finding that that last challenge around mold development is becoming increasingly common. The network will help states boards in 3 ways. First, we will help states establish a collaborative team of state and local experts that are mission aligned, and will work collaboratively with them towards change. Second, we will enhance your capacity to leverage data, research, and best practice for meaningful change. And third, we'll help you improve state level policies, programs, and practices. The network will have 4 convenings. The first will take place in October during NASBE's annual conference in Phoenix, Arizona. The other 3 convenings will be virtual and take place in January, March, and May. And the 5 network states will each receive a $10,000 grant to support staff work time and to convene in state stakeholder meetings. So if you have an interest in this or want to learn more, please do contact me. Next slide, please. We also have several collaborative partnerships with national organizations steeped in research and child development policy and practice. One effort you see highlighted on this slide is the Whole Child Policy Table, which is a 3-year partnership that is between NASBE, the Learning Policy Institute, the Council of Chief State School Officers, the National Governors Association, and the National Conference of State Legislatures. We all, with other partners like the National Urban League and After School Alliance, have developed a toolkit to support state leaders in taking a more coordinated approach rather than a piecemeal approach to creating systems that are student-centered. The toolkit walks states through 5 policy elements: setting a whole child vision, transforming learning environments, redesigning learning, building adult capacity, and investing resources equitably and efficiently. Another project NASBE is involved in is our state policy database on school health, which has more than 200 school health policies cataloged for all states in the District of Columbia. The policies are categorized to align with CDC's whole school, whole community, whole child model. And using the database, you can see what existing policies your state has in the books and compare it to others. Examples of the policies included are suicide prevention, health education requirements, nurse to student ratios, school meals, and professional development for trauma. You can access the database at a link that Joey will be placing in the chat box. Lastly, NASBE is a member of the National Healthy Schools Collaborative, which is an effort to bring together education and health groups to promote cross-sector collaboration and alignment of activities. Other partners include the American Academy of Pediatrics, the National Association of School Nurses, and the NEA. The collaborative released a 10-year roadmap for healthy schools this spring, and NASBE is working with the funder, Kaiser Permanente, to explore opportunities to help state boards deepen relationships with pediatric health experts and parents and families as critical partners. With that, I will turn it over to Selena.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? I've got the earbuds in, so
yeah, we can hear you, Selena.
Okay, great. So my name is Selena Puritet. I've been with NASBE since December, and you know, this was like the first thing that I got started on, and it's been growing and growing, and we're so close to getting started. I'm so excited. So it's the Student Engagement Collaborative. We've been able, this is something that NASBE's been wanting to do, to provide services specifically to student board members. And we, got a little bit of funding from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that allowed us to take this on. Paolo, I think your screen changed.
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's okay. That's all right. I'm working on 2 screens too, so that's why you might see me looking over here. But so the student engagement collaborative, like I said, is new. I've been doing a lot of background research and engaging with members. Some of you I've spoke with going all the way back to legislative conference. So, this has been a long time in development, but it's closely aligned to our public education positions on state government collaboration, specifically on stakeholder engagement, which of course includes students. So the Student Engagement Collaborative will facilitate meaningful student involvement in state education policymaking by providing research and collaboration opportunities for voting and non-voting student board members and facilitating student-adult partnerships. Currently, 24 states have voting or non-voting student board members. Several of you on this call have voting or non-voting student board members. I'm very excited to report that most of you on this call, your state has a student who has registered already for the Student Engagement Collaborative. So these students are very eager and capable of providing valuable insight on state education policy issues affecting them. And the adults want to hear what they have to say. So we're going to just take this momentum and help nurture youth-adult partnerships over the next 5 months. So the Student Engagement Collaborative will take place, its first meeting is right around the corner on August 11th, and then it'll go through December 20 of this year. We will meet virtually with students 3 times in August, October, and December. And we are going to work on these virtual sessions, will occur after school hours. And the sessions will be a space for students to ask questions about state board processes, build a network of peers in other states, and begin to develop policy analysis skills, which will be applied to their action plan. Now, I used to be a teacher. I am a licensed Virginia secondary social studies teacher. So I bring a lot of that, project-based learning, student-centered learning into this project. And that action plan that I referenced is a way for students to learn how to be on state boards of education through doing. It's a project-based learning opportunity, essentially. And it'll be an action plan to address a school health issue in their state. It's going to be an application of the skills and knowledge that students accumulate through the virtual sessions and their attendance at State Board of Education meetings. So we will support the action plan development by hosting regional check-ins during the 3rd weeks of September and November. And we're also going to help students build relationships with their board colleagues and ensure that whatever action plan that they're developing is rooted in what the state needs, rooted in data, and guided by an experienced state board member. So the other half of the objective you see on the screen is building the capacity of state leaders to engage students in decision-making. I see a comment here. I will address that comment in just a moment, Kathleen, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna pair students with a non-student board member, and that non-student board member will help students. Basically, they'll be a trusted adult during state board meetings. They will help students make connections with agency staff, board staff, other board members, help build the connection so that the student can work on their action plan and have guidance from other adults and actually get to know people within the state education field. So our recruitment process is still open. We are officially, the registration closes this Friday. And then a welcome package will be sent to all registrants on August 5th. Our first session is August 11th. So to address Kathleen's question, you are welcome to reach out to me to register a little bit late. We can accommodate some late registrants on a case-by-case basis. But essentially, I'm the project coordinator for this. I'm happy to be flexible. I've been very flexible up to this point. I have really been engaging members this entire time. Like, this is a very member-driven service. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about this, to collaborate with you all. So I welcome any contact, any comments, questions, what have you. And you can direct them to my email, selena.pierrottet@nasby.org. But if there aren't any other questions about that, I will pass it over to Paolo.
Great, thanks so much. This slide is just meant to, show our appreciation for the various funders and partners that have stepped forward. Rather than include them in the slide, I just put them all here on the final slide of the set, so you can see a little bit about who we are partnering with on these different initiatives. So I'm going to stop here because that essentially concludes our projects presentation, and see if there are any questions that you all might have before talking about closing comments on session 3 and wrapping up. Woody, I see your hand up.
Yes, sorry. I have a question about the licensure standards. Is it possible to go back to that slide?
Sure.
I'm not sure I understand. It says supporting the standards. Does that relate to trying to change the examinations? How do we support the standards revisions?
Yeah, good question, Woody. So each state has their own set of goals. So yes, some states are examining the licensure test requirements. You should certainly feel free to reach out to me by email. I'd be happy to discuss this further by email or have a call or a Zoom meeting. But yes, that is part of some of the activities that states are engaging in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Megan raises a good point. Often when we have a network or a collaborative or a, the direction that each state team might go in could be very different. I know that's true on the ECE network because, part of it, you go in, you try to do a little bit of a needs assessment, and then you gauge where people are interested in doing some of the policy development. And so everybody might pick something slightly different, and yet we can still support them with technical assistance and cross-state interactions and so forth and so on.
But I mean to improve to revise the standards, you would need to actually revise the examinations, right?
Well, it works either way, but yeah, I mean, if you do revise standards, depending on what component of the standards the assessments are testing, whether those are actually changed or not. Sometimes assessments are content oriented, right? And so may, even in a standards redesign might still there might be a fit for that. So it all depends on the approach that's taken. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
We're always open also, periodically to ideas for, new things to be doing. So, and we routinely are surveying what state boards are, we're monitoring news reports, we're monitoring what boards are doing to try to better understand what is of interest. And then, especially if we have, funders who also have an interest in supporting further work in a particular area, we try to define new projects that we have. We have to be careful because we don't necessarily have the capacity. We couldn't support like 15 different projects at one time. And each of the projects you heard today is at a somewhat different level of intensity and somewhat different level of significance. So very good. Well, we are almost, we are 6 minutes away from 4 o'clock. So I'm just going to wrap up to highlight that on August 24th at the same time period, we're going to have session 3, really going to focus on collaboration and coordination. We'll talk a little bit about our work and what's happening at the federal level. We'll talk about how state partners work with each other, going back to one of the slides about the education ecosystem that I had in the first presentation. We're going to build that out, that concept out a little bit more about how different parts of the education ecosystem and even some parts of the non-education ecosystem work together and collaborate in the interest of supporting students. And then discuss a little bit about communication strategies, because we know board members are thrust into the public light. Sometimes it's brighter in some places than others. And so Renee will talk you through some of the things that we see happening with regard to the communications needs of board members and what strategies you might be able to employ. And then, as I said at the beginning, we will also engage in the selection of our new member representative to the board of directors of NASBE. As I said, if you're interested in running for that position, please send an email to Sharon Cannon, and we'll make sure you're on the list. And then at some point between this meeting and the next one, we'll send out more information so that those participating in the third meeting can do a little bit of pre-reading about the bios of the individuals who may be up. And then those individuals will also have a little bit of an opportunity during session 3 to address the group, and then we'll engage in some voting at that point in time. So thank you so very, very much for taking the time out of your busy days. Thank you for your service to your state boards. We know that presents its own challenge around your time and your commitment, and we always welcome and value your commitment to NASBE as well, and taking the time to learn about this membership organization, what we do, and the possibilities that you might have to be more involved in that work and how it best supports your work as a state board member. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you in August for session 3.
Bye-bye.